If you clicked on this video, it's probably because you have your next big opportunity lined up and you're thinking about leaving your job. The question is, how do you break the news to your manager? In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the exact steps you need to take to tell your manager, hey, I'm hitting the door, while also keeping your professional brand and reputation intact. So let's dive into it. The first thing you want to do is aim to provide your current manager with 2 weeks advance notice of your resignation. This is a common courtesy in the corporate world, but there is a massive disclaimer that I want to add to this point because I have seen this go, unfortunately, catastrophically wrong in the past. And so that disclaimer is, until your next opportunity is set in stone, do not notify your current manager of your intended resignation. Until the offer letter from your next employer is signed, sealed, and delivered in your inbox, your future employer is not obligated to hire you. And so I have seen situations where a candidate gets off of an interview with the hiring manager for their next opportunity, and the hiring manager tells them, hey, I'm going to be sending you an offer letter later today. Make sure to check your inbox and get that back to us as soon as possible. After which point, the candidate goes to their current manager and says, hey, I got this next opportunity. I'm resigning in 2 weeks. But then the offer letter never comes. And this can be for a number of reasons. Maybe that hiring manager had a family emergency that popped up, and unfortunately, they are not in charge of the hiring decision anymore. Maybe the company decided to institute a hiring freeze due to budget constraints, or maybe the hiring manager just decided to go a different direction and choose another candidate. Anything can happen until that offer letter is in your inbox. So do not inform your current manager of your next move until that move is solidified. Now, the other thing that you want to consider when it comes to providing 2 weeks advance notice of your resignation is you may have to negotiate a little bit of wiggle room with your start date with your future employer. Meaning, if your future employer asks if you can start next week, ask them for another week so that you can give your current manager 2 weeks notice and transition your work. Again, this is a common courtesy in the corporate world, and so your future employer should understand your desire to be courteous toward your current team. If you feel like in that conversation you are not going to be able to negotiate additional time to provide that 2 weeks notice to your current manager, don't push it too hard. Again, this is a courtesy, it is not a requirement. In which case, you just want to make sure that you notify your manager as early as possible. The next thing you want to do before you give your manager that 2-week notice is gather your belongings. The reason for this, as harsh as it may sound, is you never know how quickly the company is going to turn around and cut your access to the building or decommission your login credentials. Also, your manager could technically turn around and tell you, hey, thanks for the 2-week notice. We actually don't need the 2 weeks. Feel free to hit the door. And so before that happens, make sure that you head into the office and gather your personal items as indiscreetly as possible, of course, and that you gather any personal information off of your work devices before you hand in that 2-week notice. The other thing that I'll say here is think about what are the biggest career accomplishments that you have achieved in this role, and how are you telling the story of those career successes with quantifiable data, because this may be the last time that you have access to that historical information to help you tell that story. And I will say that with a disclaimer that you don't want to make sure that you are operating within the confines of the law and your employment agreement. So don't go and take confidential information, but make sure that you have the data that you need in order to tell that career success story. The third thing you want to do is actually write out your resignation letter. The idea here is that you want to have the conversation with your manager face to face first, but then you want to quickly follow that conversation up with your written resignation letter so that the 2-week advance notice is on the record. So let's talk about the structure of your resignation letter. In the first paragraph, your resignation should include a clear statement of your resignation intention and the effective date of your resignation, which is ideally going to be 2 weeks from the date of sending the letter. The first paragraph should also include your reason for leaving if you feel like sharing it. For example, if you want to tell your manager that you have landed a new job at X company, this is where you would include it. The second paragraph should reflect on your time under your manager's leadership. You want to make them feel good about a job well done if that was the reality of the situation. So make sure that this section is genuine, and if you did not enjoy your manager's leadership, nothing is better than something here. You can always wrap this paragraph up with a piece of advice that you will carry on to your next role that your manager gave you in the past. This is just a nice personal touch that shows that you truly appreciate your manager's leadership. And then the third paragraph should include the steps that you will take as you approach the end date in terms of pulling together a transition plan or training other employees on the team. It should also state that you'd like to keep in touch if that is your true desire. The beautiful thing about writing out your resignation letter before having the conversation with your manager is that the conversation will likely include some of the talking points that you will think through as you write your letter. Now, the final thing that you want to do when it comes to your resignation letter, which is always a nice touch, is actually print the resignation letter out and sign it by hand. If you are going to be delivering the letter electronically, you can then create a digital copy of the signed letter and send it, but it is also a nice touch to hand it over physically to your manager when you have the conversation. This is just one of those lost arts in the corporate world, but it truly is a mark of your appreciation. Now, if you want to be a true professional, what you're going to do is pull together a transition plan before you have the conversation with your manager, informing them of your 2-week notice. A transition plan is simply a document that details all of the work that you're responsible for, the current status, the future owner, and how you plan on transitioning that work over to them. For example, if you're in charge of distributing a weekly leadership team report, you want to make sure that that scope of responsibility is listed on your transition plan, that you have listed the current status of the future report that needs to be distributed, the future owner who is going to take on that scope of work once you leave the company, and any transition steps that you are going to take to bring that person up to speed. For example, are you going to schedule a meeting with them, show them the resources and the steps it takes to curate the report and who to distribute that report to? Now, if you don't know who the future owner of that work is going to be, it's okay to leave a placeholder in your transition plan and figure out that future owner in the conversation you're going to have with your manager. The last thing that I'll say regarding your transition plan is as you execute on your transition plan, so this is going to be post the conversation you have with your manager about your 2-week notice, you want to make sure that you are informing your manager of the parts of the plan that have been completed. So this might look like once you've had a meeting with the future owner of that weekly report in our example, you may want to send a follow-up email to that future owner and CC your manager stating, hey, thanks for meeting with me earlier this week. Here are some of the high-level topics we discussed. Here are some of the links to the information and the content that you need to curate the report in the future. And as a recap, here is the distribution list. This is just a professional courtesy that ensures your manager knows that nothing has slipped through the cracks as you transition out of the organization. And it's one of those things that's going to leave a positive last impression on your manager, because once you leave the company, life goes on, the same work still needs to get executed, and this is going to make your manager's life easier, knowing that the work is being cared for and that it has been transitioned efficiently. All right, so it is finally time to have the conversation with your manager. And it is always best practice to have this conversation before you send your resignation letter. So walking into that conversation, again, make sure you have your resignation letter and your transition plan written out in hand if you are going to hand it to your manager or ready to send as a follow-up to the conversation. Leverage any existing one-to-one that you may already have on the calendar with your manager, or reach out to them really quick and ask them if they have a moment to chat. The beautiful thing about this again is that the content of your conversation is going to closely mirror the content of your resignation letter. You want to cover off on the same points. If you had a good rapport with your manager, you probably want to keep this conversational and open, where you share the details of where you're going next, of the things you appreciated about your time or what you learned under their leadership. And this is also a great opportunity to get any feedback on how your manager experienced you in the role or your efficiency doing the work that you did on the team. Also, this is a good point to slip in there if you had that good rapport that you'd like to keep in touch with your manager going forward. If you didn't have the best rapport with your manager, then you probably just want to keep this cordial. Again, this is not the time to go flipping desks and letting the middle finger fly.
Well, I thought I remembered you saying that you wanted to express yourself.
I do want to express myself. Okay? I hate this job. I hate this goddamn job, and I don't need it.
Remain a professional, keep it cordial, and just work through the talking points. The natural exit to this conversation, because obviously this conversation can get awkward, is to redirect the conversation naturally into your transition steps. And this is where having that transition plan written out ahead of time can be beneficial. Focus on what you're going to do to help the manager in this time of panic for them, likely because now they have work that doesn't have an owner, and focus on the value that you can bring your manager in these final 2 weeks. The last thing that I'll hone in on here is make sure that you operate with respect and professionalism as you exit the company. As big as corporate is, the funny thing about it is it really feels like a game of rotating or musical chairs. You just never know who is going to resurface later along your career journey and who lands in a position of power or influence over your future career success. So always keep that in mind. Other than that, I want to personally congratulate you on whatever that next big step or opportunity is in your career journey. Make sure that you hit the comment section. Let me know if any of this advice was useful. I really hope that these videos add value to you all, so I am thankful that you tune in. Also, would love your feedback. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you can become apprised of new content as it does drop weekly. Listen, a career is a long journey to sojourn without a guide. So if you don't believe that you can do better, I'm here to make sure you know better. Upskill professionals, helping you forge a path up.